Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tropic Trade Group, and this is your end of day recap for Monday, April 17th. Welcome to a new trading week. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer here. Summary of the day, I would say this is a word that I use often, but I'm going to use it specifically for today. This is just interesting price action for the day. A lot of rotation. Bios and solar stocks were very strong for the day. Oh, I have to resort this. Sorry, this is from this morning and when we did our midday video. But the banks, look at the banks kind of charge here. That's something different, right? So that should be in dark green for the day. The market comes back. So this is the second. So a couple things that I noticed on Friday as well as today. The dollar has been getting stronger. So this is when I begin to talk more about the dollar and more about rates, right? That is more bigger picture. That is more macro. I don't tend to really get that into the macro unless there's something to be concerned about. And it usually when I really kind of get into the macro, that's when things like the dollar, things like interest rates are moving fast, right? There's some velocity. If things kind of move slow, the market can adjust to that, right? But if it's a sudden shock like we've seen before, just going back to last year when the dollar moved up like it did, right? The market began to kind of freak out with the stronger dollar. Same thing with interest rates. As interest rates really began to move quickly, and we have had several episodes of interest rates moving quickly, both on the long end and the short end of the curve, right? Then it becomes more of a macro tape. So this was the second day. Well, actually, I guess you could say the third day since this. Well, no, that's right. 2 days since this Virgin point of control was taken out. That was your reversal in the US dollar, and it was up another 0.5%. So I'm really not that concerned about this unless it breaks, call it 28 in the UUP, which is the dollar bull ETF, right? And if it does it with also with some good velocity. But right now, you could look at the price action, and I was going over this. I was on Benzinga earlier, and I was going through this example. So if you heard me talk about it earlier, you could skip this. But here was the dollar on Friday, right? Grinded higher all the way till about 12:45. Remember that time. Then today it kind of did the same thing. Again, this isn't exact, right? But it kind of leveled off around that 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock time. Okay, and then we started to kind of not retrace too much of the move, but just kind of come in. Right now, let's look at the Qs chart for the day, and also what we did on Friday. On Friday. And it really helps to have the value areas on your charts, because the value area is where you're going to find resistance and support based on the previous day's activity. So on Friday, and I'm going to zoom in here. So what time? Well, at least I'm going to try to zoom in. Let me move back. Okay, perfect. So notice what time that we kind of came in and made a low for the day on Friday, right? 12:45. Okay. Now we came in, we tried to bounce a little bit, right? And then we kind of made a double bottom for the day, and we managed to rally back, right, from that sell-off that happened at 10 o'clock. Today, again, it's different. I mean, it's similar, but it's different. It's not. Sorry, let me say that again. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar. Okay, so similar meaning another move to the downside, but we're finding support right where right where theoretically we should be, which is the bottom of value for the day. And again, it's not perfect. You could see that we pierced it. We came back up a little bit and we retested and made a little bit of a higher low for the day, right? And then we had a nice recovery when we got back to where we started the day. So while this has been very slow and the ranges aren't huge, but there are some things that you could do if you want to buy the dip on days. Again, you have to be patient. You kind of have to wait until the bottom is in for the day, and this is tricky. Also, notice the same thing. And again, I'm just trying to provide you with a little bit of pattern recognition, but notice like in the, when it's around like 10:30, 11 o'clock, give or take, right? There is this, Sorry, Thinkorswim doesn't like when I zoom in on the first attempt, but we start to kind of fight back a little bit, but there's not enough power, and we just continue with the trajectory, right, until we get to that 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock hour. Now, again, it's coinciding with the dollar strength backing off. That could, if you don't see the dollar's strength tomorrow, then you may have a completely different setup for the day. But and then we kind of, if we look at today's price action, start the day lower, there's a very small fight back, and then you get that whoosh lower from about 10:30 to sometime in 12, and then there's the recovery. So the observations here is that buyers are coming back in on these dips, and also the breadth has been okay for the day. Like, we're not seeing I don't have the chart up of the, I guess I can bring this up really quickly for you guys, but if I bring up if I I put this chart in here every couple of days, but if we go back to the not this chart, sorry, yeah, that one didn't look right. If we go to the McClellan summation index, right, there's been a change of tone. Right, we've been seeing stronger breadth. So even on days like this, where the market was a little bit weak there in the morning, the breadth isn't getting really negative. Right, it's kind of staying okay. Right, and again, you can find this on our breadth indicator where we use so here's, for example, for today. Right, so this was the breadth never really went negative, and again, we're looking at up volume versus down volume to kind of come up with a read. But that's on the bottom, that's all the way on the bottom of your screen is what I'm referring to. Just never really was that bad for the day, right? And going back to this, right now, I continue to be leaning more to the long side, because that's what the McClellan summation index is telling me to do, is to be more on the bullish side until we see a crossover back below the 10-day moving average. Right, you see how these simple types of very simple indicator, and having a signal with that indicator can just kind of help you a little bit. All right, so that's cues. Overall, we're not going anywhere in terms of the cues. We haven't, this hasn't moved at all since the beginning of the month. Sorry if I said year, I apologize, but we haven't gone anywhere this month, right? It's been chopped back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right. One that's particularly interesting is the small caps, right? The small caps, this is now, and this is a must watch for me tomorrow, but if you are a regular viewer of my video, you know that I've mentioned this before. The same level, 178.86. We keep coming up to that level, and usually how resistance works, if you keep banging on the door of resistance, eventually it's going to break through. Now, if you get up here and then you don't make it and you start trailing back away, then it was a rejection. But this is hanging around too much, and I'm beginning to think that this IWM is going to break through here. So again, 178.86. And if it does break, realize that this also hasn't really gone anywhere this year. What's the month to date here? So for IWM, I can actually, this flips at like just about every day, right? But we're now up a whopping 20 basis points for the month. Qs are still down, are actually down for the month, down 6. I mean, all of these are within 1%, right, from the start of the month. So the price action is really, really tight that we're seeing. So even though the breadth has been okay, you still have to kind of be on your toes, because the price action is so tight. Eventually we're going to break one way or another, right? So if we don't break that IWM level that I just mentioned, then you've got to watch to the downside, okay? And same thing with the Qs, right? The Qs, have been moving above this 312 level. So if that breaks that, then I would watch out. All right, let's talk about today's price action. Really nice in the solar group. My favorite, ENPH, of course, got an upgrade this morning, but I was making a point about some of these names, and it's important to stress, because tomorrow we're going to really kind of earnings season is going to pick up with Netflix after the close, and then later in the week we get Tesla, which I think Tesla is going to be really interesting. Before I get to the example here, but Netflix, which has been saw some call activity today. Look at how tight the price action is in Tesla. I think that this thing's really going to move or has a chance to really move on earnings. Here's what Tesla has done over the last quarters, right? So we always kind of look to see what the stocks have often they have similar behavior on earnings. There's always going to be an outlier, but ultimately you want to see how a stock behaves on earnings. Last quarter it went up 11%. It's mixed. Like Tesla's is not all that consistent on earnings, right? You've got, if you go back, I think the last 10 quarters without even adding them up, it's probably 5 and 5 or 4 and 6, right? In terms of up versus down. So it's not a very consistent name. I'll give you you want to know a consistent name on earnings? ServiceNow. But look at how, going back 20 quarters, yes, again, it's not to say it can't do it, but there's only, for a while, I think it went 10 quarters in a row, positive price action, right? Notice, by the way, that's the thing that I care about most. Forget about whether it beats earnings or guidance or, guidance of course does matter, right? And these things do matter, but what is the most important thing is this column, what the price change is after, how they set the guidance, how they set the tone, what they say in their earnings call, right? There are some companies who know how to do this. Management teams know how to do this. There's some other management teams who don't know how to do it very well, and hence they have a pretty bad reaction. So anyway, this will be one that we'll talk about more in the week. I wanted to talk about this one, right? A lot of people getting excited. ENPH up, that's my excited sign, of 7% today. If you caught this trade, congratulations to you. That's great. But keep in mind, it's a very important concept, so don't get mad at me if you dislike this concept. But earnings will set the tone for the next quarter. Well, what do I mean by that? Take a look at the last time that this name reported earnings, right? Is here, this big red candle. What has the stock done since then? It's done nothing, right? So, people fight with these names all the time. Oh, what do you think about this name? I think it needs to have it's going to have earnings, earnings are coming up. It's going to have to set the tone on earnings, right? It's a big difference. Now look at another name within the same sector, right? So First Solar, right? What do you notice about this name? It's had good earnings now a couple times. Look at the price action. Is it going sideways? Is it going from the upper left to the lower right? No, it's moving up because it keeps having strong earnings, right? And every time it does this, right, the stock is a buying opportunity when it comes into support, right? So, it's a very important concept because I get questions, right? I of course run a trading room, and we have a channel where we have Q&A, and I answer as many questions as possible. But if a name, it's not to say that it's impossible. It can happen, but trading is in probabilities, right? If a name has had a good earnings reaction, right, there's a higher probability it's going to continue to go up and to the right, right? Again, nothing's 100%, and it's probably not even 90-10%, but it's that's how it works the majority of the time, right? I'm not trying to sorry, somebody asked me about this name earlier. Snowflake is a great example of this too. I always get questions, what do you think about Snowflake? I think it needs to have a good quarter, right? So when we look at Snowflake, again, and the reason why I'm going through this in depth is because we're going to get a bunch of names that are going to be reporting earnings, and they're going to set up for new leadership. So this is a very sideways chart. I mean, that's the positive thing. It hasn't broken down. But look at when it had earnings, right? It had a bad earnings quarter. And look at what it's done since, right? That was back on 3-2. The stock's done nothing. Now, again, it's nice that it hasn't broken down from here, but this is not, it will need to be straightened out on its next earnings quarter, unless it unveils some type of new product, or they pre-announce earnings or something, so barring any other events, it's probably going to be stagnant until it reports the next earnings, right? This is very, this is not complicated stuff, right? That is why every quarter we compile a strong earnings gap list, right? And we started that with JP Morgan. So I only have one name on the list so far, but it's very, very important. I think last quarter we found like 50 names, right, that had either a strong earnings reaction. It doesn't have to be a huge gap up day to go on my list. Those also will go on my list, but they're going to create better trading opportunities for the next quarter. Again, nothing is 100%. It doesn't mean that they're all going to go up, but they're going to provide a pretty good watch list. All right. So many examples of the same thing. Most names that don't have that gap down on earnings or don't have a good earnings reaction, they're kind of and you hear this term, but I don't hear this term that often anymore, but they're dead money for the next quarter, right? Now, again, it's not to say like you can't squeak out some money, right? Like ENPH again had nice upgrade today. And again, I don't hate these companies, but it's just so much harder to make money in them. So yes, this was a big day for this name, up 7.7%, but I would rather go long for solar than I would this name. All right. Okay, so another group that, of course, that was strong was biotech, right? On the deal announcement. XBI continues to kind of move back here. I'm watching IBB. Right, even these charts, some of them are very sideways, but if we look at the weekly chart, and if this gets above 134.62, I'll be all about biotech, and this is the more larger cap biotech ETF, but maybe it will begin to trend. Right, again, that's ultimately what I'm looking for, is for either names or groups to start to trend. Right, sideways is tough. Right, you can play the ranges and so forth, right, and that's a lot about what we've been experiencing over the last 6 months or so. But I'm more for names that are in areas that are trending. All right, so we talked about a couple different areas. I'm not going to go too long in this video, but yeah, I do think that the outperformance in IWM is pretty good. I also, right, this concept all the time. I don't want to go into this, so I changed my mind. I want to keep this video short. But the banks were strong today. That's going to be interesting. We're going to get more bank earnings tomorrow. Let me go through a couple names that were on my watch list. So this is the watch list we're putting out for members every weekend, and I build to it. Right, it's a starting point for the week, and notice that it's got it's got stops built in. So even if you're not waiting for the trigger, like even if you're already long the name, I provide a stop price, which is either bottom of the value area or, like, let's say the 20-day moving average if the name is trending. But this did pretty well. IoT was the winner out of this group. Unfortunately, I just didn't get a hold of this name, right? So we did the setup. It just moved a little bit too quick for me on the open. I like to see how things are going to settle in the first 15 minutes, and this name just went off to the races. So congrats if you caught it. It was a nice setup. This is a name that I've been in and out of. Today just was not in it. But we did discuss it for members, and I hope that some of you caught it. Of course, I like to be in them too, right? I'm not one of these guys who says, "Hey, I gave you this setup. Look at what we did." Right? Usually, if I'm confident enough in giving you the setup, I'll take the trade as well, right? And I took a couple trades on this today, but that was by far the winner. I would watch going forward for this name. Again, the 1 hour chart will give you some hints, right? But we went out and we took this virgin point of control out, right? So I would make sure it stays above 2090. Right, and if it stays above 2090, then you got something. And I think that there was good volume on this name today too. Right, look at the volume. Right, so again, this name was tricky after earnings because it came in here, it just couldn't get above its 5-day moving average. It did it failed at the top of value, checked back to the bottom of value, and since then it's been acting really well. A lot of people picked up on this green candle on Friday. All right, some other names too that acted pretty well. Toll Brothers. Right, I think that this is a very interesting looking chart. Again, it's a slower mover. right? That's okay. Like, I know some people, they only like these fast moving growth names. The problem is with fast moving growth names, like I for one like to hold more than one position. When you're dealing with a lot of fast growth names, you've got to stay on top of these names because they move so quickly. I like being in a Toll Brothers or a GE, which I got into today, right? This is really nice, and nice looking setup. It's starting to kind of break out of its range, so that's one I'm watching for tomorrow. GE, I mentioned I got into today. Again, it's just the trend is really nice here, right? It's not, I don't hear as many people talk about this as like, a lot of people were talking about IoT over the weekend. I get it. It's more exciting when those things move, but this is a nice, you can play this through options and do quite well with it. But ultimately I'm targeting just, a few bucks up, which is $100 for this one. Another one too that I'm going to add to our watch list is Mobileye. This is one I was looking at towards the end of last week, right? Look at how bunched up this thing is, right? Similar, like we were talking about with IWM, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 different times this thing has tried to break out. So 43.21 is definitely something to pay attention to if it can break further in that. Other names on our watch list, Crocs had a really nice day. I do own that one in the TTG trend portfolio, and that was up 3.4% from our trigger for this one, and not bad at all. AXON was a little bit disappointing, right? This was a name too that I thought was setting up coming into today. It's okay. It was up 0.75% today. When you see these ugly looking candles like this, right? The main thing is that they stay above their short-term moving averages. You could have the ugliest candle in the world for the day, right? But if it doesn't lose its trend, in my opinion, it still is okay. So I'll be positioned in this one basically as long as it stays above the 5 and the 20, which I like that they continue to move higher, the moving averages as well. All right, guys, I'm going to cut it off here for the day. Guys, have a great night, and it should be a very interesting week. Also, what was the other thing that I was going to say here is that I did put out Substack note too. If this is something that you like, we go over this for members every single morning, right? I go through first what the charts look like. Now, I'm not just putting out the charts just to say, hey, this is what the trend is. I'm giving you actual levels to pay attention to so that you can make some decisions. So for example, like S&P, like we're putting the daily chart and the 1 hour. So I can basically tell you where your support is, right? And then if you need to put on a hedge, I got a question over the weekend. They're like, Christian, do you short? Yes, I do when I need to, but I don't put on shorts just for the hell of it, just to say I shorted, right? I think some people on Twitter, they like to hear that. They like to say, "Oh, are you shorting?" Well, I'm not going to short when there's breadth expansion. If that changes and we break a support level, sure, I will look to play. I will look to basically buffer some of my longs with going short the indices. But that's why I'm putting out these levels on a day-to-day basis, so that if we do begin to break down, right, I know what to do, right? And I think we went over that once last week when things looked a little bit iffy, what the action plan would be, in terms of if we broke support. All right, so make sure that you sign up for my Substack. You can find that on my Twitter feed, and love to see you in the trading room. So hope to see you there bright and early tomorrow morning. We do our pre-market session every day. We start right around like 10 after 9 o'clock. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.